On to maybe more controversial matters. So we have the case of Lia Thomas, who became the first openly transgender athlete to win an NCAA, which is the collegiate competition over in the USA, and she won the 500 freestyle on over the weekend of the 21st. That sparked a letters from parents from a rival school who asked that she should be disqualified from competing against the other girls, the other women. And this also then sparked the debate on whether or not transgender women should be allowed to compete in women's sport. On this, Chuck, what are your thoughts?
Man, it's a tricky subject because I don't imagine that the guys change their gender to become girls to compete in sports. There are other reasons besides sports. And the basis of them making the switch, as we said, is outside of that. It just so happens that they participate in said sport. It's tricky because then there are clear guidelines, or rather, there are clear biological advantages and signals as to what makes you a male and what makes you female. And when you are a transgender, there's still enough male in you to give you some sort of advantage. Doesn't mean you're going to win, but in this case, she did win, and people are saying, well, that's because of what you previously were. You cannot excuse the fact that as a male, you produce testosterone naturally. And as transgender, you need to take estrogen and suppress some of that natural occurring testosterone to put you on some equal footing with the ladies. But it is tricky because I mean, it's like saying, Jay, we're gonna go fight Brock Lesnar, but as in a handicap match. That's how we're gonna try and make it fair. But me punching Brock Lesnar is not gonna be the same as him punching me. There might be two of us, but I'm gonna feel it. You know what I mean? So you try even things out, but end of the day, to what degree, to what level? Because yeah, try as you may, the world is not equal. Not yet anyway, in terms of physical performance, in terms of how we apply ourselves in sports, because that's why there's still women's teams in certain things. Certain sports you can mix and match and you'll get a similar outcome. But in this case, in swimming, I think she has an advantage. I think at this point in time, maybe they are complaining because they don't quite understand to what level she has an advantage, if she even has one. But I think without the proper education, I, if I was a parent as well, I'd complain because there she is. She looks more buffer than my girl. She looks a little stronger, a little taller than my girl. She appears a particular way than what my girl and the rest of the group looks like. And then she's winning again. So that would be an issue. So it is a tricky subject, man. And the world is trying to come around. But if you're Caster Semenya, you believe the world is not trying to come around because they're barring you from competing against other women. So it is very tricky in that particular situation because, I mean, Nakas is same boot, different foot because it's not a transgender issue. It's intersex, but it's still a matter of can you compete with the natural, if I could call it that way, sex. So it's very tricky. Very, very tricky.
So if you have gone through puberty as a male, you develop, you get to have a bigger heart, you get to have bigger lungs, your muscle fibers and your fast twitch muscles as well are far ahead than that of a woman. You, generally speaking, men also are taller. Just the physiology is more suited to produce athletic feats at a higher level than what you see of women. When you then transition to becoming a transgender woman, and you go through reassignment surgery and you go through hormone replacement therapy, that advantage is curtailed somewhat, but it is not entirely removed if you've gone through puberty because some of those things are still there. And what makes sport as intriguing as it is competitive balance. When you take away competitive balance, then it becomes a farce. The reason that you hear football fans, for example, talk about the French league or the Bundesliga or what you see over in Scotland as a farmers league is, and the reason that they can throw those jobs at those leagues is because there is one team that is just overly dominant. The reason the perception of the EPL and being the best league in the world might not be the best league technically in terms of what the players are able to do, because I do think players in Spain and Italy are have a better football education behind them than what you see from players in England. But it is the idea that although it doesn't happen often, Liverpool can go get 7 at Aston Villa. It is that on that one occasion, Leicester can have that Cinderella story and win the league. On a more consistent basis, it is the idea that anyone can get it on any given Saturday, on any given Sunday. So competitive balance is what has all these eyes watching the world of sport. If you take that away, then it becomes something totally different. So the uproar from those who do not want transgender women to be participants in women's sport is the thought that they are going to destroy that competitive balance. You're going to have a group of people who previously were male and who did inherit those advantages of going through puberty as males now in women's sport, and they are just going to be the people who are dominant in that category of sport. But that is still to be seen. That's my thinking is that is still to be seen. Maybe what you want to do and why people are against it right now is they want to stop it from happening before it happens. But as you say, right, first of all, I don't think anyone I might be wrong, but I don't think anyone transitions with the idea that I just want to go become a dominant female competitor, because that is quite if you were someone who has some athletic ability as a man and you looked over in women's sport. The other thing about women's sport, it's not that lucrative. Still to this day, women are talking about equal pay, or being paid better, something close to what the men are getting in their disciplines. So the decision to do that, to go through hormone therapy, to go through gender reassignment surgery, to go through everything that comes with being a transgender person in the world, so that you can go beat a couple of girls over a decade. You're gonna have to live with that as that person, like following that. What you're gonna do at that point? So so if there is a fear that a large group of men are going to be making the decisions to go be to become transgender women, to go be dominant in women's sport, I think that's a bit ridiculous.
That would be called gender doping. I just thought of the term.
That's what that would be, you know. So as I'm saying, there are fears which perhaps are warranted, but right now, Chuck, even with the case of Lia Thomas, right, she did win the 500 free, but she came 5th in the 200 free. Also, she's not breaking world records. In fact, in one of the longer distances, I believe the 1,500 freestyle or 1,650 yards, because America being America, she was 9 seconds off of the world record of Katie Ledecky, who is an absolute dominant athlete in those longer distances. So, which is why I was confused by the Costa thing as well. Costa not a transgender matter, but her being them taking her through all these hoops that she needs to jump over in order to compete. She's not even broken a world record. Like, yes, she's a fate distance ahead of the field, but then it just so happens that in the era she's competing in, the field is just not that good, because she's not even beating the best woman of all time in that sport. And that woman was doping. You can say what you want, like those pictures, and we know the history of those communist countries back in the day. So if Lia Thomas had come out and she absolutely shattered all the world records that have been established by the same distance as you see what male swimmers are ahead of like female swimmers, then I think we have a controversy on our hands. At the moment, no. Could it become a controversy? Perhaps.
You know, it's also, I think, glaring with this is that it's individual sports where this stands out. If you had you find it in rugby teams all over the world that there's this one guy who's just super strong, but because we have 14 other guys and I don't have to deal with them by myself, fine, we'll take that. We'll just get a quicker guy or someone who's more skillful, and we'll try balance it out that way in terms of competitive advantage. But if it's one-on-one and that guy is a mountain and going against me, then it's like, hold on, this is not fair anymore, as you're talking about competitive advantage. So you wonder then, if it was so in a team sport, would we have so much noise? If we had one guy joining a girls' volleyball team, one guy joining, do you think it warrants as much noise as individual sport?
Perhaps not. As you say, it is hard to be dominant that way in team sport. But the more famous sport, for example, if in women's football, if someone comes along who is then a transgender woman, and then sets the world alight, again, if they're doing that in women's football, what is the return on investment? The American women have just recently won their case to be paid an equal amount as the U.S. men's national team, but that's just them. This is not true across the board, you know. So that's the question. What would that do? So if a minnow, say, field a transgender woman and she is head and shoulders better than everybody else, is that minnow suddenly going to win the World Cup? I don't think so. I don't know. I think and this is what I'm saying. I don't think it's not a big deal entirely. I think at the moment, nothing has happened to make us go, hold up. This is yes, you know. But if, for example, Chuck, you have a formerly male human being who then is transitioned into being a transgender woman, and then they want to go into combat sport. I think we're gonna have to have a different conversation. And the thing about what's happening right now around the world with the different sports, the different sporting codes have policies in place in terms of before you can compete as a woman, this is what would have needed to happen. Which is why one, I don't think you'll go through all of that just to compete as a woman, you know. But also, as far as the science is available to them at this point, this is what these are the recommendations. Someone like Lia Thomas, she's gone through that route. She's actually met all the entire criteria before she can compete amongst the women. So if they then look at it again and see that, okay, it's not working, they can adjust it. But then that will cause another controversy because you then trying to keep this person out. So ultimately, Chuck, I think the matter here is this. I don't think sports is equipped to answer a question that has gripped society.
True.
This is something that is debated in society. The matter of a gender-neutral bathroom. There are people who are for it, there are people who are against it. And, I mean, if that hasn't happened yet, there's not been consensus around that as of yet, what makes us think that the sporting world are the people who are supposed to be burdened with the decision of, okay, this is what is going to happen with transgender people in the world? I just don't think there's the capacity to be making such decisions.
I mean,
it's a hard one.
You're right in that we're a long way ahead. Rather, we're a long way from it being an issue because it crops up here and there, but it's not people who are breaking records or dominating sports. They're participating and doing fairly well here and there, you know. But it feels to me that as the world progresses, more people are coming out, more people are changing their sex, and not because it's a sign of the times or whatever, but I think people were like that back then. There was no medicine to aid them. There was more shame and ridicule. People were getting killed. It still happens in some parts of Africa, some parts of Asia, where if you are gay, if you are transgender, you have more than just lifestyle choices in terms of problems. You could get killed. And so if we're going to have more people come out, more people change their sex and live the way they identify, it does pose a very interesting thing in that how do we, because I mean the Caster Semenya thing has spun the athletic world around. I mean, if you look at her comments and what is the findings, right? I don't even understand. So according to Caster's tweet, according to the World Athletics and its members, I'm a male when it comes to 400, 800, 1.5 and 1.6 meters. I'm a female in the 100, 200 and long distance events. For me, it doesn't make sense. And so, how do you create an inclusive world where Caster can compete and feel that she's being treated fairly? I think, as you're saying, it's a social problem, and
that's the question. How do you? Because those guidelines, what are they based on? You know, and that to me, when I see Caster tweeting that, and I am then privy to this information, that to me says they don't know what they're doing. They don't really know how to go about it. And I don't think there's any sporting body in the world who can say of a certainty that, okay, we know the research, we know the science, we know what is, what isn't, and this then is how we're supposed to move forward. And you cannot poke holes into that. Because even if, Chuck, they just open it up, that's going to be a problem in itself. Because what I'm saying as well is, it's not that there isn't a space to voice out that maybe we have a problem with this. Because my thing is, I'd love to hear from the athletes. What do the athletes say? Because if you look on the men's side, for example, when you have a guy like Usain Bolt, 6'5", and he's able to stride like he does, come along, we don't have a chance until this guy gets out of his prime, and you can't do
not much to
anything
say as well.
to stop that. But then Usain Bolt comes out around once every 100 years. When, as he is now, no longer in the sport, we're gonna move on, But and I understand, as you put it, gender doping. If that's the case, that's different because Usain Bolt was born that way. If you want to put it that way, Whereas you've then come into this realm to compete against these people who are born, who are cisgender from birth. So, as I say, I don't think there are actual answers that are cast in stone out there right now. This is something we're gonna have to play by ear. As I'm saying, if we ever get to a point where in women's sport, the top 100 in any given discipline is made up of transgender women, then there's going to be a question of, is this the women's sport? Or do you then need now a category for trans? Because then how many categories are you going to have? Because the other thing is, are we going to get to a place where it's just going to be an open field? There are no men and women's sport. Because if that happens, all the men are going to win. We know how that is. Because technically, and I was saying this to someone, technically, men's sport is actually open. Women are not barred from competing against men. You just don't see them because competitive balance does not allow for them to be there and compete and be competitive against the men. We're going to have to watch this
because I'm thinking of a potential step in the right direction, but I don't know if it's feasible. But let me ask you the question. If you were running and you came second to Marion Jones and you found out Marion Jones is doping and you get bumped up from silver to gold, are you ecstatic or is like, it wasn't in the moment when I was competing? As an athlete, would you appreciate that gold?
I'd be happy because I'd know that the only reason that they beat me on the day is because they were cheating.
All right, cool. So here's my thought. I don't know if it's a solution. If, for instance, and I know opening it up might be messy, but if we let Custer, for instance, swim and Thomas swim, and as modern medicine progresses, like they do it with cycling, and we know, suddenly we retrospectively test the
Like
samples. No, not let them dope, but let them compete until we have better understanding of what's actually going on. And Custer's world record will have an asterisk next to it because, technically, Custer was always ahead and always had an advantage. Or we find out that Custer was always within the lines of a female athlete, and we give her what's due to her. And then we can say retrospectively, if she is then in the wrong. Number 2, here's your gold. I think if you just let her run, let her run, because time will tell if we were right or not. But if you deny her from running, you're stopping her dreams. But if you're letting her run with other people who would finish second, you might be first if that person is doping or rather has an unfair advantage. So I feel let them compete because what else can we do at this point in time until we know
what
more?
else and that's the thing. They're going to have to experiment. They're gonna have to play it by ear. As I'm saying, until you get to a point where there's been a major shift, and if you can point to the fact that they're all doing it so that they can be Olympic champions. As I say, I don't know how many people are out there who are thinking to themselves, man, I was a good high school athlete, but I didn't make it to the pros. I'm gonna go become live as a transgender woman in this world, just so that I can maybe get a chance at winning Olympic and world glory.
And that's not guaranteed as well.
That isn't guaranteed. See, with the Custer matter, for example, Custer's been unlucky, in my opinion. Custer has suffered from Chilemo from Kenya, not actually coming through on her potential, because Pamela, that's the name. Pamela Chilemo was as far ahead of the field as Custer was when she was 18 years old. They just missed each other. The age allowed for them to be competing against one another, but the Kenyan athlete was unfortunately injured most of the time. Had she not been injured, she would have been competing, right? I would encourage you, go look at Pamela Chilemo's videos and her times and compare them to Caster Semenya's times. Had they been competing together at the same time, would have had one of the greatest athletic rivalries of all time, and they would have had these issues. The issue is that Custer didn't get injured. She was at the top 4 as long as she was, and she was that far ahead of the field. Whereas, as I'm saying, Chilemo was just as far ahead of the field, and it was just her talent. There was no questions around what is happening within with her biology, So, as you say, maybe athletes who are just as dominant will come along, and you'll still maintain that competitive balance. As soon as that is thrown off kilter, I think that's when you maybe want to revisit as to what is happening.